Hi there, welcome to MPL's educational series, and today we're going to be focusing on how we are improving the way in which data centers can be managed in a more simplistic format by introducing to you NGEN and how we are showing both IT and facilities managers how to best create a user-friendly platform that can deliver real-time data and historical data in the best format possible. One of the key issues that we're finding when talking to data center managers across the industry is the complexity of the tool sets that they're running currently. And we feel that with NGEN we're delivering a simplistic platform that can integrate data from that hardware that they're finding very difficult to manage across multiple software platforms. So let's take a look first of all at the dashboard to give you an insight into how simple we're making software management. So we're going to start by reviewing the main dashboard of NGEN. So here we've got the home page, and on the left hand side we've got the main menu with the modules for navigation. The centerpiece of this page shows the simplicity of being able to see at first hand your data center information. So if we click on one of the yellow dots, you can immediately see information about that site, which happens to be in Iceland. On the right hand side we've got the custom widgets, and this is very useful for all users because we can customize the widgets according to your needs. You can have as many widgets as you want shown on the front screen, and those can be dedicated to whichever management layer would like to see what at any time in the tool. So if we click on a widget, for example, here we can see the widgets that are currently enabled, and we can also create new widgets as well by adding a widget. We can select the type of widget we want. It could be anything from 24-hour access denied on the locking solution. We want a global view or a data center view, and then the color of the widget. If we go back to the main home screen, we can see that widget's now been created. And there we have it in green. See, very simple to use, very simple to create. And now we have an additional widget in our screen. So moving further into this module, if we click on the intelligent PDUs, here we see another method through which we can manage and analyze data with all the PDUs connected in the racks. So if we select one of the PDUs, for example, here again we can interrogate data from that PDU, and we've got the same level of information showing in another way. So we click on the icon where amps are located. Here we have a choice of which information we'd like to see: amps, watts, volts, kilowatts, power factor or kilowatt usage, and cost. We click on one of those, and then we can analyze from which time period we'd like to see that data. So it could be in real time or it could be historical. So we take the last month's reading, for example. Here we can see all of the information on that particular parameter shown over the month's period. And we can roll the cursor along those lines and we can see how the numbers are changing, and therefore we can then analyze that data in more detail. If there's been an incident related to that PDU or a piece of equipment, it's very easy to spot. Depending on what types of hardware are installed inside the racks, different PDUs have different capabilities, whether it's managing power on an overall status or even managing individual sockets. NGEN has the capability to cater for all types. So here we're going to show how we can illustrate socket data. So here we have a typical arrangement here where the different sockets are detailed out below the line, and here we can show the phases as well. If it's a three-phase PDU, for example, you can see phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 illustrated in light blue, dark blue and green. So again, this is a good indication to the customer as to how they're managing the phases on a particular PDU and on a socket, for example, as well. Just enhancing on the socket analysis, we've also included a new feature under PDU, which is socket history. And here we can actually analyze the actual historical data from a particular outlet, which again can be very useful if you're analyzing an issue with a particular server. So we click on amps, for example, We click on a time period over the last month, for example. Here we can see the data changing over that particular timestamp for that particular parameter, where you follow the cursor over the line. As we touched on earlier, one of the key features of NGEN is the ability to integrate with third-party hardware. And here we have some examples of how we've integrated with both PDUs and also with busbar technology. So if we click on tap-offs, here again, this is where we would show data coming out of a typical tap-off in a busbar. Again, we can see the analysis of this data. If we click on a particular tap-off, just like we do with the PDU, again, you can analyze everything in a similar fashion. One of the key features here in enabling the correct capacity management in the PDU breaker is that we can auto-calculate the amps and the kilowatts. So if we put into the amps field, for example, 100 amps, this will auto-calculate the kilowatts. This is a very useful feature for any user to avoid having to calculate kilowatts independently. And then we can link the main PDU to actual in-rack PDU. So if we go into field A1 and we add the breaker and the phase and the capacity, and then we select a rack, GR1 for example, that was on the grid, and from there, whatever PDUs are connected in that rack will show up here, and then we can add those together. So we start to build a power field that can then be updated and illustrated in NGEN. And here we have what we've just created on screen. So if we move back to the data center floor plan, and if we move the cursor along to where we've got the More icon on the right-hand side of the screen, here we can select T&H Psychometric graph. This is one of the key features that we've introduced into NGEN to allow customers to quickly see which sensors are in range and which sensors are out of range on the ASHRAE recommended guidelines. And you can actually hover the cursor over the sensors included in the system and see the data related to those sensors. But then you can also see which sensors are out of range. And this is a very useful scenario to understand how well you're managing the environment with the temperature humidity sensors. Here we've created an image which illustrates two installations with two different customers. And these gives you very good examples of how the Delta T can help in understanding where airflow issues may be occurring. Obviously there are three delta values on each triangle. The first delta value ideally should be as close to zero as possible, as this shows the heat increase from the air delivery by the cooling unit to the inlet of the rack. Now, in the case of the triangle on the left, if there's a delta T of 10 degrees, it would indicate that the inlet temperature to the rack is higher than the temperature that left the cooling unit. So in other words, it's 10 degrees higher than it should be. Obviously, this change in temperature means that the room is not working very well on the airflow side. The larger this delta T, the bigger the problems the customer would have in airflow. So in this case, you can see quite clearly that customer on the left has some issues in this area, whereas the customer on the right is certainly more efficient with a 1.1 delta versus a 9.6 delta. If we look at delta 2 on the bottom of the screen, we've got two very different values as well. This delta T is different to the other two deltas, as this is showing the temperature change from the inlet to the outlet inside the rack. So in theory, this delta is less accurate in our delta T triangle, but if done correctly, it could help to calibrate the cooling units, which again is a very important aspect of the data center management. By getting better accuracy on this delta, a facility manager could set the cooling units to deliver the right amount of air with the right temperature. So in other words, if used correctly, you could help to set up the cooling units to deliver exactly what is needed by the servers, again achieving huge efficiency levels. The final delta, delta 3, again is very similar to the first delta insofar as it should be as close to zero as possible, as this is showing the heat loss from the outlet of the rack back to the return air on the cooling units. The larger this delta, the bigger the problems again the customer would have with airflow. Hopefully, by showing a bit more detail around the delta T, it's starting to illustrate how useful NGEN is becoming by using our hardware solutions or third-party airflow sensors and data coming into NGEN to illustrate how we are showing efficiency levels between key points inside the data center. In order to create an actual access process, if we click into jobs, here we can actually walk through a typical process of designating a card to an engineer to come in and do a piece of work in the rack. So we click on add a job. We can then create a name for the job. It may have specific change requests waiting to the process within the particular client, a start date and an end date. So here you can designate the actual time through which that door can be opened and closed. And then you can go into the system and then find out what type of door it is that we're actually opening or closing, the user, and then the card itself. That job has then been created. It's now in the system, and now it's ready to be used. Once the job has been created, we then have some various actions that we can actually work with, which are very easy to control on the screen, as we're going to demonstrate now. First of all, we can actually enable or disable the job, as shown there. We can also completely delete the job very easily, and then we can also edit the job accordingly by pulling up the screen here, and we can make any changes very quickly. The next segment of the drop-down menu in security is all down to the management of the system itself. Here's where we can manage the users, the cards, the doors themselves, cubes, depending on how the customer is creating their data center environment. We also have a specific whitelist that's connected to our pollers in case we want to manage cards inside the data room rather than externally. We also have a capability to input IP cameras. Obviously, these are very key towards the security access of both racks and cold aisles, and also the management of the polar interface into the rack security system. And finally, we have the history section where we can actually manage and control access and review history of which engineers have gone into which racks and when. And then obviously we can follow audit trails depending on whether there's been an incident and we need to detect very quickly if access was done at a specific time or if a door has been left open and so on. So moving on to the history section within the card access control system, here we can actually review access that's taken place. If we click on access, we can then see obviously events where access has been denied. Could be down to a card not assigned, could be down to another issue. Obviously we can see situations where obviously racks have been authorized and therefore timestamps can be tracked as well, depending on what was set up in the initial process. The final module within NGEN is the asset management module. Obviously touching on the importance of simplicity, what we've tried to do here is deliver an asset management module that also links back into the data center infrastructure module where we're correlating server assets with the power readings. If we first of all take a look into the rack view, here we have a simple to use format where you can visibly see obviously the table of assets, and then we can actually go into a specific rack itself and see the U space that's being used and the U space available. We also have the capability then to analyze any connected PDU data and temperature and humidity data with that rack as is shown there, and also you can see the U space that's used and the U space available, and also the specific U heights within the rack that are available to be used. So again, very simple, easy to use way of managing your infrastructure at rack level. In order to build a rack, we have a specific library of assets that are already created inside NGEN. So it's very simple to actually go and find the specific model of unit that you're looking for. So if we click on Management and go into Model Repository, here this will bring up a list of potential asset modules. So we can plug in Dell, for example, and Dell R610. We can click on that asset. And this will pull up all the details around that particular box. If we scroll down, then we'll see an actual image, a front image of the actual asset. Package images are also available on certain items in the model repository. If we go back again and maybe pick an HP model, for example, This will give us quite a long list of assets relating to that manufacturer. We can click on one of those, for example, and then this will give us all the same data information, also images of the front and rear of that particular asset. Should an asset model not be in the list, it's possible to add a new asset by clicking on the Add button, and then a simple menu of information comes up to be filled in, and then obviously that asset can be created within the repository very easily. Moving on to the report section in NGEN now. This is a very useful feature and one that gets plenty of attention from data center managers, because reports are critical in order to determine how data is managed, how data is analysed, and then obviously how decisions are made. We've created a custom report builder inside NGEN where we can build reports according to customer needs. And these reports can be managed and created in this module. For example, if we click on Create Report, here we've got a set template on how the report can be structured. We can write SQL queries, and then we can create the output message that we want to do in terms of where the report needs to be sent. If we click on Import Report, we can also import a report from a particular file, and then that can be set up in NGEN and managed accordingly from there. We've also selected some examples of typical reports. For example, as we touched on the sensors before, if we can click on wire-free sensors, here is a typical layout of how a report could look, where we're showing, for example, in this case, the top 10 sensors with the highest temperature in the data center. Again, this can be tailored according to customer needs. Another key feature of the reports module is the ability then to export the report content. This can be done by various different formats. The standard is XML, but we can also create JSON, CSV and PDF structures so that they can be easily read by whoever needs to read them within the business. Just enhancing on how easy it is to gain information from NGEN, if we click on the triangle next to the connected green light, we can see the last 4 breaches that have occurred within the IT environment globally. So again, this enhances on the key point about how easy it is to find information in this tool. Another important feature is the ability to control thresholds. Obviously, thresholds can fluctuate according to the device and the equipment they're connected to, so it's very important for the client to be able to manage those thresholds in order to enable alarms as needed in the system. So here we're showing how a threshold can be changed depending on the metric that we want to manage. So for example, we can do amps, volts or watts. We can set the criticality level, the lowest point of the threshold and the highest point of the threshold. And then also we can go into the actual alert management and select how we want that alert to be messaged into the environment. And then we can enable it. 2 other key features on the menu screen are the alerts and the reports. Obviously, these are intrinsically linked towards what we've just reviewed in the data center platform, as data captured there can be managed by creating custom reports and also by managing alerts. So if we go to the alerts section first, here we've got 2 options. We can go into the environmental alerts or the system alerts. System alerts are really there to allow us to understand what has happened actually with NGEN and the application, and different aspects of failure that may have occurred that could cause downtime in data management. So if we click on Environment Alerts, here we can see a very simple to use display of exactly what alerts have occurred depending on the parameter. So this menu shows us data center, the rack where they occurred, the device name, the sensor, the device itself, the breach value and the limits. So plenty of data in order to understand what's happened. If we want to drill down into more detail, we can go into the status bar and open the alert. And this then allows us to analyze in more detail the breach of the alert and different data around the alert. And we can also then suppress the alert. And this enables us to then keep the alert open for a period of time. And this may occur if we're doing a piece of work inside the data center where we know specifically that an alert may occur. It might be a disconnection in a power strip, or it could be the fact that a lot of heat is occurring in that environment while a test may be going on, or a rack door is open. So again, we can manage that alert over a period of time, and then we can stop that alert from occurring once that piece of work has been finished. So again, this is just illustrating the different capabilities around the alerts management.